WarsawJS.
Hi, thank you so much, Barry, for the introduction. And yes, it was mentioned, I'll be talking about how do the large language networks harvest already biased data, then perpetuate them within their own algorithms. And just a quick FYI, while I did study coding, I am a terrible coder. So if you ask me a very technical question, I'll break down crying because that's not something I'm very good at. Just a quick question, where can I? Just like this? Okay, yeah. So an inspirational quote for the start, and I just wanted to quickly preface it by saying that I come from an intersectional school of feminism, which is a doctrine that acknowledges that while there are many solutions right now being offered to the gender-related problems, many of them only relate to white women from developed countries. And that's not necessarily the best case, because as you will see, many of the examples that I will give can as well be related to the people of color, LGBTQ plus people, and all of the other minorities. So I think this element of being interconnected is really crucial in here. Right. So I divided this topic into like two main areas. First one being the social, so how the societal change influences the data that we harvest, and then how the data is then challenged in the technical processes. And I'm going to start with the social. And I've done a very, very tiny axis with absolutely incomplete, with just a few of events that led to the eventual development of neural networks and LLMs. And as you can see, my main point here is that it's actually impossible to think about machines without developments from the 16th or even 17th century. And we can see that the thoughts of computation started well before the 20th century. And that was way, way, way before the first wave of feminism and before even the feminist thought began to exist. And while we are thinking about the first calculators, René Descartes was creating the most influential philosophical idea, which led to the still widespread belief that women are somehow less intellectually capable than men. And it took years before women could be professors at universities, and the first text that dealt with the representation of women in technology and the fact that because we are members of society which are treated differently, technology will also treat us differently. And that didn't start to emerge until the half of the 20th century. So I think it's quite important to take into consideration that for years we were thinking about computation. We didn't even think about any other perspectives other than the perspective of white European men, as we have here. And yeah, so I'm sure you all know the Turing test very well, but I'm not sure if many people are aware that the first test that Turing created was involved distinguishing between a man and a woman. And why is that important to neural nets? Well, there is no such thing as a man and a woman objectively. There is it's not possible to define that. All of these definitions are dictated by our culture. And while we talk about things that are very much corporeal, it's not easy to translate them directly into something that's immaterial, such as technology, and that can be very, I think, easily seen in the example of Shirley cards. And Shirley cards were cards created by Kodak in, I think, in the 1940s, which were supposed to make it easier to adjust the exposition of the film cameras. And they did it on an example of their employee, Shirley, pictured here. And but Shirley was white, and up until the 1970s, it was impossible to capture a white person and a black person on with the same film exposition. That is actually the first picture that managed to do so. That's the first new film. So all the photographs that we have up until the late second half of the 20th century carry some kind of invisible bias that is hard to think about because we don't really have an option of seeing an alternative. And that all, I think, culminates in a phenomenon known as historical bias. Because I think if I asked you what's more prone to be biased, whether that would be a modern computer or a camera from 19th century, like a camera obscura, I think an obvious answer would be that would be a computer, because it's a product of an era in which we recognize the struggle of women, the struggle of people of color. But unfortunately, all of the mechanical agents that we use today, they inherit all of the bias and they still amplify it. They're not free of it. They have more politically correct descriptions, and they do have some solutions, but they are built on the legacy of treating people inequally. So I think in the realm of LLMs or the large language networks, there are 3 levels of bias. Historical bias we already covered, dataset bias, algorithmic bias, and dataset bias. That's the visual representation of those biases. Historical bias occurs before the dataset harvesting, and then it occurs already in the network. All of these sources will be cited at the end. And yeah, so the most I think crucial point with dataset bias is that the majority of the voices that we have in the data sets, I will give specific examples in a second, that LLMs use come from young men from developed countries, which by itself it's not wrong that men from developed countries are being represented, but they shouldn't be the only ones which are being represented, because that can lead to a few severe consequences. And so does anybody know what is ChatGPT's trained data set composed of, as an example? Reddit. Very well. Very, very well. Yeah, OpenAI, it's not necessarily secret knowledge, but it's not necessarily public either. OpenAI, on their website, they just said it was composed of 30 billion words and 570 gigabytes of data. But thanks to some researchers, which I'll also cite at the end, they also say that it was composed of various internet sources and books. And thanks to a few researchers, we know that that would mostly Wikipedia articles and Reddit forums. And here are the demographics of said websites. We can see that Reddit actually surprised me. I thought it was going to be way less, but Wikipedia is even worse. And so we already have data from a very tiny percentage of population, but unfortunately that misrepresentation is doubled, because as many sociological research, which I also cite at the end, shown young men from developed countries are the kind of people who have the highest chances of representing extremist conservative views. And that means that not only they are the hegemony, that means their hegemonic views are being hegemonic once again. So it's like squared. So it's very hard to escape that, because that's what our data is composed of. And secondly, and this is the part I think is the most interesting, the way data sets are currently filtered disposes of voices or marginalized communities. There's, I'm sorry for vulgar words, but that's the list called a list of dirty, naughty, obscene, and otherwise bad words, which is sometimes called the silent censorship of AI. These are the words I just put the ones that start with A, that LLMs, this is AI's, this is OpenAI's list that they use. It's not their list, but that's the one they used. And these are the words that LLMs cannot use in any case. They just can't use it. And from one side, it's a great idea to filter all potentially racist and overly sexualized or offensive words. But at the same time, the problem is that words change, their definitions, their connotations change over time. And in many cases, certain words were extremely offensive. For example, the word queer used to be an extreme offense, such as the word wink, or a word gay actually used to be an offense too. So if you filter out all the pages that have these words, you filter out a lot of experiences of marginalized communities which reclaim those words and they use it. So we lose a lot of experiences. We lose a lot of experiences of people who we just filter out for a reason. And there is an easy solution to this, because it's not possible to filter those by hand, but that's not necessarily a good solution either. And finally, dataset bias mostly appears due to the regeneration of the old phenomenon, which I'm sure you know very well. It's an interesting value of neural networks, which means that they cannot really create something entirely new. It's very much visible in areas such as computer vision and, for example, in automatic cars. So when a car trained in California sees a moose in Norwegian wood, it doesn't know what it is because it never saw it before, and it's impossible of comprehending it. So all of this, the bias that we saw, it's looped. It cannot escape. So what could be the solutions? The first one that many researchers proposed would be to increase dataset size, and while it's the most, I think, right now widely used solution, it also leads to the computational depth, where we don't really know what our dataset contains. And if AI makes any mistake, we cannot check it because the dataset is too large, which then leads to the black box problem, which is already very prominent. The second idea was to increase the computational power, and it also works, but on a very small scale. Otherwise, it leads to the phenomenon of apophenia, when the large networks hallucinate things. And it's okay when it comes to, you know, funny dog memes or like find ChatGPT answers, but at the same time, well, I don't know. We have instances of Google OpenAI telling people to jump off a bridge and being well quite racist. So it's not necessarily a good choice either. Sorry, that was crazy. That was crazy. Yeah, so I really recommend checking some of the opinions that Google AI like suggested, because it suggested to eat cockroaches. It suggested to add glue to your pizza sauce. It was really quite interesting. And my proposed solution is literacy, understood not only as being able to read, but also as engaging with media, teaching logical fallacies, teaching about unreliable narrators, about teaching about checking sources, and teaching people how to engage with spoken word and creative elements in a way that can prepare them to face that. Thank you.
It's in the online.
If you come back to the slide with the 3 types of biases,
Yep.
that very technical one. My question there was...
This one?
Yeah, it suggests that each of the biases is like valid on its own. My question is whether the algorithmic bias is actually, if there was no dataset bias or historical bias, like if all the data was legitimate to the fullest, would the algorithmic bias still apply?
Unfortunately, I don't think there is a way of creating completely legitimate data, because the data that we have now, it's not legitimate.
How about if we reduce the scope of the LLM and, for example, it's only mathematics? Mathematics is objective, rather, right?
To be fair, I'm not a mathematics expert, unfortunately. But to be fair, I think mathematics is a very, very, very unique example. But I'm sure that there are some theories that are being seen as not completely, for example, you know, checked, or which are still being developed. And I think that if the problem of the origination of the old didn't exist, if AI was truly capable of creating new thoughts, then we would have the theory of everything right now, and we would have like all the math theories explained. So I do think it's actually still applicable. The type of the type of bias I was talking about here is completely social, and while I think math also has some social elements. I'm pretty sure like that's everything does. What is funded, what is not funded, and stuff like that. And we cannot get rid of the human factor in anything that we do. So I think that that this is a very, very unique example. But I do think that there would be some bias still, because the neural nets, I think, are prone to giving you the same solutions. So that could be seen as bias as well.
There is a paradox. I don't recall how it's named, but it goes like this. If you're extremely liberal, radically liberal, you allow all the ideas in the conversation, then you also include ideas that are hateful and harmful to the idea of the liberty itself. So where do you draw a line, having that in consideration?
Where do I personally draw a line, or in regards to this discussion?
Yes, you have a power of determining which data should be filtered out.
Censorship, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, we do have censorship right now, so that's
Yes,
not like.
But but clearly it's not a good baseline. So where is it?
Well, for me personally, I think a good baseline is drawing a line where a certain idea is extremely harmful and dangerous, to a public, or it calls to hate or calls to death. But I think it's very hard to draw the line, and it's a question of who is drawing the line, because so I think this is I think it was I was at a like a Google DeepMind conference once, and they were talking about how they trained their LLM, which is shit, but like how, but still was very interesting. And they said that basically they had a lot of problems with fine tuning, with questions such as what should immigrants be allowed into Europe, and because it is valid to have a different opinion, then yes, they should, but and it's not really ethical to not let people talk about some things. But I do think that, for example, the fact that in Poland you cannot really publicly support Nazism or Adolf Hitler, I do think that's a good thing. And we already have censorship. I don't think it's possible to get rid of censorship, because no statements are objective in the social, like from the social perspective. So I do think that there should be a line drawn when we talk about viewpoints that are genocidal in nature, for example. That's my opinion. Just like a quick thought that came to me. Sorry. I think your question is so valid on theoretical level. I've been wondering about that like ever since I remember. But I do think that in practice, it's rarely that these kind of extremely controversial views are being super restricted, because when something is restricted, there are a lot of people who are like, oh no, I actually think that Hitler was a good guy. Oh no, I actually really support communism. And I think that it's a paradox that those people very often talk about the rights being taken away, while they do take rights of minorities as well. So while in a perfect world, I think that the line should be drawn at very like far in the spectrum, I think that it's not discussion for now, because right now I think a lot of viewpoints are still not being expressed, viewpoints that are not hateful or detrimental to society. They're still not being expressed because of the societal like contempt, especially in Poland, and
especially in Poland.
Especially in Poland, and yeah, like, but not only in Poland. I've been in London for 4 years, and it's not that good. It's not that great there as well. So I think we maybe should focus first on enhancing the good elements before we start to like
you can't unread, you can't unknow, you can't unthink, you can't eliminate words from the dictionary. So if I stand here right now and use the N-word, am I allowed to do that? Is that offensive to anyone?
You can. You have to have an N-word pass.
I have an N-word pass. So does your son. I know that. The thing is this. It's very important to really remember that we are the ones that give value to whether or not these words have value. So the weight of what you're saying. What about comedians? Now, if we can't have satirical comedy and we can't talk about really ugly things in a very unpleasant way, why should we be restricted from doing that? The idea of censorship, I'm against. Let them say what they're going to say. Let them do what they're going to do. If we improve conditions in society, maybe there'll be less aggression and less anger and less hatred. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. Why take anything away? Thank you. We're going to just run out of time. Can we talk with you later after? Because we're just going to keep going. I thought this should have been a panel discussion. I really did.
We should do that.
This is a really great topic, and we really appreciate you so much. Please give everyone give a big hand to Iga.